What's going on, everybody? This is another episode of Coordinated Chaos. In this week's episode, we'll be going over what happened during the divisional round of the NFL playoffs. Then we're going to get into some of the head coaching and coaching tracking going on throughout the league. Then we're going to jump into the conference championship preview and gambling prediction as well. So let's go ahead and jump into the first game of this weekend. The Ravens versus the Texans. This was the lone game that I got wrong against the spread this weekend. So I went 3 for 4, not too bad. But this one I got completely wrong. Thought the Texans were going to cover here at the 9.5. Thought the line was a little bit too big. But really what happened was in the second half, the Ravens and Todd Monken, the offense, really figured out how to really just get around what DeMeco Ryans and that Houston Texans defense were throwing at them in the second half. Or what happened in the first half, they were able to supplement that in the second half, essentially. So they were throwing a ton of blitzes, mixing up coverages and things of that nature in the first half against the Ravens. The Ravens offense was not moving the ball great necessarily against that scheme and that whole game plan that DeMeco Ryans had kind of put together. And the first half, really some fluky stuff. Obviously, you had the Steven Sims punt return for a touchdown that had the Houston Texans really in the game. They went into half tied 10-10. But then, like I said, after the Ravens came out in the halftime, they made a ton of adjustments during the halftime and knew how to beat the blitz, which is something that you can't take for granted in 2024 when you have teams like the Philadelphia Eagles out here not knowing what to do when the blitz is coming. Every single game of of the entire season this season. So just the fact that Todd Monken and Lamar Jackson and that coaching staff were able to find a way to essentially beat the blitz and use it to their advantage more often than not in the second half, which just made them score tons of points in this game. I mean, at this point, they really they doubled down on the Lamar Jackson runs and things of that nature, because if you're going to blitz, that means you're bringing extra pressure, which means, obviously, if you want to beat the blitz on offense, you can use an extra blocker there and use your quarterback as a runner, and that's exactly what the Ravens started to implement on the offensive side of the ball in the second half, and it started to open up everything else. As soon as they started to gash them whenever they did start blitzing, then they had to back off of it, and then they could get back in their normal offensive scheme, and from then on out, it was pretty much all Ravens all day long. The Ravens just completely ran away with it, essentially. Houston Texans really didn't have a whole lot on offense for the Ravens. The Ravens defense, man, they are so much fun to watch. They are so athletic, fast, physical. They come and just hit you. They rally to the ball so quickly. Just their linebacker play and their safety play is so apparent, which is something that some teams are probably going to have to go back to the drawing board and look at when it comes to drafting and team building and stuff like that, because it seems like linebackers, where in the last few years there's been some just like a stock down in that department, where I think a lot of teams were trying to get away with not bringing in linebacker talent, real linebacker talent, because they thought they could get away with just good cornerback play, good D-line play, and good safety play. But linebackers are getting picked on more and more often in the NFL these days, and I think it's going to be a thing where the pendulum's kind of swinging back in the direction where you need some real studs in the middle of your defense there, especially there and at safety, to cover up some of the coverages and stuff in the back end that a lot of these teams are starting to really hone in on. So, like I said, Roquan Smith, Patrick Queen, huge players. Kyle Hamilton, just all over the place. All these guys are so good at their jobs, and right now, Mike McDonald is doing an incredible job putting all of his players on that Ravens defense in position to win. He is 100% going to get a head coaching look at the very least when this season's over with. I think he's probably already got some interviews, scheduled up, but I'm not 100% sure on him just yet. I think he may just be putting some of that stuff off until the season's over, which I don't blame him. Things like that can be a huge distraction when you're on a Super Bowl run. So I think he's going to try to stay focused on that side of the ball, and he's doing a great job. And like I said, he's going to get some head coaching looks whenever this season's over with, and he deserves every bit of it. Todd Monken, another guy that he's going to have his name probably in the ring this head coaching cycle as well, just because of the job he's done with Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson with Greg Roman the last however many years. That whole thing kind of ran its course, and I just don't think he was utilizing Lamar Jackson to his fullest extent. He was utilizing, obviously, his legs in that system, but I just don't think he was utilizing the amount of arm talent that Lamar Jackson actually contains. So Ravens get a huge win. Obviously, they're going to the AFC Championship game, which is going to be held in M&T Bank Stadium as they're the 1 seed. So whoever, obviously won in the other game, which I'll get to in a little bit later. No spoilers, but everybody knows because, this is essentially just a recap. But either way, Ravens get a huge win, and I am officially pulling for them to win it all this season. I think Lamar Jackson deserves it. I think it's his time. I think it's his turn. So I'm looking forward to watching him potentially play in the Super Bowl if he can get past this next opponent. Let's move on to the 49ers versus the Packers. This was the night game on Saturday night. This one was very interesting. I did not expect. So, I picked the Packers to cover, which ended up happening, obviously. But I really didn't expect the Packers to just move the ball so easily up and down the field on the 49ers. I was expecting a lot more, just a lower scoring game in general for the most part. I thought this was going to be kind of a knockdown, drag out, like defensive struggle-ish type game. But really, Jordan Love and that offense, Matt LaFleur, the game plan, it was working pretty darn well against Shanahan and their defense. Steve Wilks, I should probably say more often because he's the actual defensive coordinator. Shanahan kind of just does the offense more or less. He's the play caller on that side. So Steve Wilks, it looks like his scheme was getting a little bit torn up by Jordan Love and Matt LaFleur and that whole system. And man, I hate to say this, but there were points in this game where I saw some very iffy line judgment, ball placement, stuff like that on very high leverage situations on 3rd and 4th down where obviously the Packers were being aggressive going for it because they knew it was the 49ers are 1 seed. They can score on every possession if you let them, if your defense isn't just like on their P's and Q's. So the Packers were going for it. They were being aggressive, and man, some of the line calls and where they were placing the ball after some of these runs and catches by wide receivers was just super iffy. And like, man, I hate to point that stuff out, but like in a situation in a game where it is decided by the smallest of margins, it's just something that you have to like take into account when the refs are kind of putting their stamp on the game. You don't want to see the game be put in the hands of the refs. We've seen it too many times in high leverage situations in big time games in the NFL as of late, and it's just really disappointing. But either way, the Packers were in the game. Brock Purdy was not having a good day at the office for the most part. It was raining pretty much the entire game. There in San Francisco, and Brock Purdy already has smaller hands. He was having trouble throwing the football in the elements, which it doesn't look like there's going to be a rain in Santa Clara for next weekend, so that's a good thing for him, obviously. But yeah, 49ers eventually get the job done in this one. Essentially, Brock Purdy didn't have a great day, but when it mattered the most, he put together one drive, and he was able to get them into the end zone there to essentially win the game. Jordan Love did make a mistake at the end of that game, throwing a pick, throwing across his body, across the field. Just a pass you can't really get away with in the NFL, even if you're Jordan Love, who has superior arm talent. We've seen Brett Favre do the same thing when he was, in uniform there for the Green Bay Packers. He used to try to do that stuff all the time, and it's just people are too fast in the NFL for that to really get completed most of the time. So Jordan Love's going to learn from this. He obviously looked incredible, and he is such a good young talent, just like CJ Stroud. They had both very good playoff runs here for first-year starters. Obviously CJ Stroud's a rookie. Jordan Love's not a rookie, but he is a first-year starter this season specifically. So just the NFL is in good hands with those two quarterbacks moving forward. So looking forward to watching their careers for the rest of their careers, obviously. Let's go on to the Lions versus the Buccaneers game. This one was the first game of Sunday. And this game, it was just, I don't know, maybe it was just the fact that it was like at 3 o'clock or whatever when it came on. It was just an odd time, and it just never felt like a real playoff game to me for some reason. It felt like it was just like a random Sunday afternoon game between just two random teams in the NFC. And But then by the end of this game, it did have some real playoff feel to it. Obviously, the crowd at Ford Field there in Detroit was going absolutely berserk, just like they had the game before against the Rams. So that home field advantage is really helping out Detroit. Unfortunately, they're not going to get the benefit of that in this next round against the 49ers in Santa Clara up in the San Francisco area. So that's unfortunate for them, obviously, but they got to just be happy to be this far in the playoffs for the first time in forever, essentially. So, but yeah, Lions get the job done here. Baker Mayfield at the end throws a pick to essentially, seal the game up. But this one, it ended up being more back and forth than I was anticipating. Especially when the Lions went up by 2 scores there at the end, I thought it was pretty much over, and the Bucs were just kind of gonna lay down. But then Baker drove him back down the field, got a touchdown, and they really fought to the very end in this one. The ending was a little weird, where like it looked like they had like enough time to kind of make a little bit of a stand at the end there, but they just kind of let the time run out. Todd Bowles essentially was just like, yeah, we weren't gonna win, so which is a bold statement by him, but it is what it is. Like I said last week, the buck stops here for. No pun intended, for Baker Mayfield. We'll see what happens with him long term, because he's going to want a contract from the Buccaneers or somebody in general, as he's going to be a free agent. So that's going to be interesting. Obviously, Mike Evans being a free agent for the Buccaneers as well. Well, I wonder if he's going to just kind of sign back up. He's already won a Super Bowl with the Bucs, so he kind of has that like thing checked off on his like bucket list. But I wonder if he's going to be like one of those guys that wants to be a lifelong Buck and just kind of ride it out into the sunset, just get paid by his hometown team. Or if he's going to want to go, take his chances going somewhere else and try to, capitalize on a second Super Bowl win. He's definitely a super effective player still. I don't know, where his, prime seasons left are going to be. Like, was this his last good year? Is he going to have a cliff to fall off of next season, even when he gets paid? We may never know, but from what I saw this year, I don't think that cliff is coming anytime soon. So he could really be a contender's best friend this offseason if he decides to go the route of trying to go with another contender other than the Buccaneers, who they still have a ton of free agents they got to go through in this offseason. So I don't know if they're going to be able to replicate the success they had this season, especially running into just a beaten and downtrodden Philadelphia Eagles team in the first round. You run into a Lions team that can be susceptible to certain things on defense in this one, so that kind of worked in their favor as well. The Lions still got the job done, so it just is what it is. It's going to be interesting offseason for the Buccaneers, but let's go with the Lions here. The Lions obviously get the job done. Jahmyr Gibbs, just a ridiculously good player, just a rookie making plays. Sam Laporta, another rookie making plays. Aiden Hutchinson, second-year player making plays all over the place for this Detroit Lions team. This team is so young and talented already, and they're only going to get better with time for the most part, because obviously they're just going to get more seasoned and more experience, and just they're going to see more things essentially as they get a little bit older and they set it into their prime years in the NFL. So for them to be doing all this stuff right now is very, very impressive for the Lions, and I look forward to them having success, obviously for years to come. Let's move on. Chiefs versus Bills. Everybody's game of the weekend, obviously rematch of a couple years ago, just like I've reiterated many times on this podcast. This one was a little bit different. This one, it started out a little slow. I won't lie. It was not like the most exciting game in the world in the first half. But then, man, they started trading touchdowns by the end of, or by the third quarter and just into the fourth. And there was plays to be made. There was great throws everywhere by Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, just throwing piss missiles around the field and just lasers all over the field. Man, it was super fun to watch those two dueling it out. And at the end of the day, Patrick Mahomes just gets the job done, just takes this Chiefs offense kicking and screaming to the AFC Championship game for the, 6th time in a row now, which is just a ridiculous stat. Personally, for me, hot take or not, I think he's the greatest quarterback I've ever laid my eyes on. Like, I'm including Tom Brady and all of them in it. That's just my opinion. You don't have to agree with me. But I just think when it comes to smarts, when it comes to just straight up talent, arm talent, all of the above, just athleticism. He is the greatest football player I probably have ever seen. So I unfortunately had to watch his legacy be essentially cemented last year in the Super Bowl in person. That was not very fun for me, but at the end of the day, I can kind of sleep a little bit better at night, knowing that like probably the greatest football player of all time is the one that I had to watch beat the Philadelphia Eagles. Probably one of the best Philadelphia Eagles team we're ever going to see in our lifetime. Beat them in a Super Bowl, which it still hurts, it still sucks, but Patrick Mahomes is just that good where it's just like it just kind of is what it is. He put together, he's done this so many times where he's put together game-winning drive after game-winning drive and just sucked the life out of football teams for the past 6 years in a row now that he's been at least to the AFC Championship game, on his way to potentially going into another Super Bowl if they can get the job done against the Baltimore Ravens in Baltimore. But yeah, Chiefs get the job done. You got to feel a little bit bad for Josh Allen. He did everything in his power. He was also dragging his offense, kicking and screaming throughout this game to the divisional round of the playoffs here in this spot. Stephon Diggs kind of fell off a cliff this year for whatever reason, and he had a huge drop in this game that could have changed the whole tide of this football game in general, which is very unfortunate. But I mean, it just kind of is what it is. Sometimes players just get older faster, and this might be a situation where this is where his cliff is, but I hope not. I don't think it might. I'm starting to think it's probably not a complete cliff that he's on, but it may have to do more with Joe Brady and the way he wants to operate his offense. They started to run the ball a lot more when Joe Brady took over as offensive coordinator for Ken Dorsey early on in the season. They started to spread the ball around to their tight ends a little bit more. So maybe it's just a player personnel usage thing. And Stephon Diggs, will hear some cryptic tweets about him later about how much he wants to get out of there because of the usage and whatnot. But the grass probably isn't much greener on the other side when you look at how many elite quarterbacks there are in the NFL. They just don't grow on trees. There's a lot of good ones out there. There's not a lot of great ones out there. Josh Allen is a great one. So like I said, you might not, want to wish that upon yourself at this point, Stephon Diggs. I think you might want to just stick to where you are. I don't really know what his contract situation is. I think he's still under contract, so he'd have to force his way out of there. I don't think that's what's going to happen, to be completely honest with you. I think he'll look at the reality of the situation and say, look, we just gotta get some more weapons around me and Dalton Kincaid moving forward. I think Gabe Davis is a little overrated. Khalil Shakir really actually showed something at the end of the season here, so I think he's a good player moving forward. But yeah, I just think they need a little bit more weaponry around Josh Allen. Just see if they can just keep that defense healthy, going to a postseason, because they just got so banged up in this game. They were just behind the 8 ball, and that's why I bet on the Chiefs to win this game, or to at least cover is what I bet them. But I personally thought that they could really win the game, and they did it, obviously. So Chiefs get another big W. Bills get another heartbreaking loss. They just can't figure out a way to beat Andy Reid and Mahomes in the playoffs. One of these days, I feel like they're going to do it, but it just is not going to be this season. That pretty much wraps it up for the divisional round part. And now we're going to get into some of the head coaching and coaching tracking, I should say, around the league. So let's start with what happened today. This is Monday, the Monday after the divisional round weekend. Brian Callahan, the former offensive coordinator for the Cincinnati Bengals, is now going to be the head coach of the Tennessee Titans. So obviously, I think a lot of people around the league liked what he was able to do when Joe Burrow did go down this season, with what he was able to do with Jake Browning and keeping that offense pretty much alive and kicking with a backup quarterback. That's always a good sign of a good play caller and a good head coach type material guy. So he's going to the Titans. I don't have anything bad to say about it. Like I said, what he was able to do with Jake Browning is a very formidable job. So I think that's probably a good fit, to be completely honest with you. Moving on, we have Antonio Pierce is going to officially be the head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. I'm a huge fan of that. I've been on record saying that I think they need to just go ahead and commit to him every single time they go for the big time prize free agent or head coach available out there and sign him to a big old fat contract, 10-year deal, $100 million or whatever they gave John Gruden and Josh McDaniels the last couple times. It never worked out, and I think This is a situation that can really work for them. I think his players are going to play hard for him, and I just love this situation for Antonio Pierce and the Las Vegas Raiders. They deserve to win some games moving forward, and I think they'll do that together. Next one, we have Sirianni. Nick Sirianni of the Philadelphia Eagles. Looks like he's going to be scheduled to do a press conference on Wednesday with Howie Roseman, the general manager. So it looks like all signs are pointing to him sticking around in Philadelphia for another season at the very least. Not to be said without major changes on his coaching staff. It looks like they have officially fired Sean Desai and Matt Patricia on the defensive side of the ball, which was a really weird defensive coordinator kind of duo thing they had going on there, which is part of the reason of the collapse going down the stretch for the Philadelphia Eagles season. The defense only got worse because they were essentially trying to marry two weird systems together because Matt Patricia and Sean Desai do not have the same ideas for defenses. So that was just something that put the Eagles defense behind the eight ball all season long, or not all season long, but in the back half of the season when the collapse essentially happened. So they're out of there. Next out the door, more likely than not, is going to be Brian Johnson. What they're doing is waiting on, he has a bunch of head coaching interviews right now. He's going through the process of that. I think they're waiting to see if he ever gets hired for one of those head coaching interviews. I doubt that he will, but I think they're waiting because they don't want to, it would be a bad look for him to get fired and then get a head coaching job, essentially. So also on top of that, they do not want to fire him because if he gets a head coaching job under, still being, employed from the Eagles will get a third round draft pick in compensation per the Rooney Rule, if I'm not mistaken. That's part of that. So they're not going to fire him just yet. We'll see if all his interviews or all the people that interviewed him start getting, head coaching jobs. Then we'll see him go out the door. And we'll see what they do on the offensive coordinator side of the ball. There's some rumblings about Jim Bob Cooter, who was the offensive coordinator this year for the Indianapolis Colts, who did not play or call plays for the Colts because that's what Shane Steichen did, but he still operated as the active offensive coordinator. I don't know how I feel about that. I feel like that's a little bit of a lackluster move if that's where the Eagles decide to go on the offensive side of the ball for the coordinator position. I think there will probably be a few more names in the mix whenever the Brian Johnson, situation gets itself kind of fixed. Also moving forward, it looks like for the defensive coordinator position, they have reached out officially to Wink Martindale, obviously a former Giants defensive coordinator and Ravens defensive coordinator for many years there. Big time blitz heavy guy. I'm a fan of his system. I don't know how well it really translates to this day and age in, NFL football. But, as a guy that's an Eagles fan growing up, loving Jim Johnson, how much he blitzed, I just love that aggressiveness on defense. And it might not fit, the systems of 2024 right now, but I will not be mad if that's the guy that takes our defense into this next era of Eagles football. And then we also apparently reached out to Ryan Nielsen, who actually ended up getting a job with the Jacksonville Jaguars. So he is no longer on the table for the Philadelphia Eagles, but he is with now Doug Peterson as his defensive coordinator, who they fired. Mike Caldwell, the defense coordinator for them earlier on in the season, he was kind of the fall guy whenever the Jaguars had their collapse at the end of the season as well. So Mike Caldwell out in Jacksonville, Ryan Nielsen from the Falcons. Defensive coordinator position now in for Jacksonville there for the Jaguars. Ryan Nielsen had a pretty good season with the Falcons. Obviously, Arthur Smith and his whole staff got fired, so that's why he is on the open market. Otherwise, he did a great job with the guys there in Atlanta. They had great talent. I say great talent. I should say they had good talent, but Ryan Nielsen kind of put them over the top, so he did a very good job for them. I think he'll be able to do a good job for the Jacksonville Jaguars moving forward. And then the Eagles, also the last guy that they've reached out to and officially given an interview for has been Ron Rivera, obviously former head coach of the Commanders that got fired earlier this season. And so he's out there. The last time he was a defensive coordinator specifically, he was with the Chargers in 2010, and he had a very, very good unit there in I guess that was San Diego back then for the Chargers. And so I personally don't mind this move at all. If like that's the case, Ron Rivera ends up being the defensive coordinator specifically, I think that's a good move for the Eagles. I think we need somebody that can focus on specifically the defense, kind of be the head coach of the defense, really control that side of the ball. I think people respect him. I think he's a good defensive mind. I just don't think he's a great head coach where he has to manage situations and call defensive plays, which he had to do a lot of this past season with the Commanders after they fired Jack Del Rio midseason. So I think he had a lot on his plate this past season, and he's kind of just underperformed as a head coach in general. But I think as a defensive mind, as a specific defensive coordinator, I think he could do a fantastic job for the Philadelphia Eagles. So I'm on board with that. If that's where they go, I'm good with that. Then we'll see how on board I will be with whoever they pick to go forward with the offensive coordinator job. But let's move on to the vacancies left in the NFL for head coaches. We still have the Panthers, Chargers, Falcons, Commanders, and Seahawks out there. To me, so pretty much all these teams are more or less interviewing the same types of people, all the way from like the Falcons have interviewed, I think, Bill Belichick twice now. They're really in on Bill Belichick, but they've interviewed everybody from Bill to Bobby Slowick to Ben Johnson. They're getting everybody involved. I think the Falcons aren't going to they're going to exhaust all their resources to get everybody in there to see who they think is going to be the best fit, obviously. We'll see if any of them kind of just say, no, we have a better opportunity elsewhere, blah, blah, blah. But Falcons seem to be a pretty hot job, and they really, I think, want Bill Belichick as their first option there. The Panthers, like I said, I think I saw earlier today that they officially interviewed Bobby Slowick and people of that nature. I think they've got a Ben Johnson and a Dan Quinn on their list as well. So, like I said, a lot of these guys are overlapping with their interviews. I personally think Dan Quinn's going to go to the Seahawks. I said that last week, and I still think that's the case. That just makes too much sense for the Seattle Seahawks, unless that last game against the Packers and as a Cowboy there, Dan Quinn, unless that just soured everybody, but it doesn't look like he's still getting a ton of interviews from all teams across the league. He's got an interview from the Chargers and all those guys. Chargers are interviewing Mike Vrabel as well, so all these guys are getting interviews, and it's going to be very interesting to see. It looks like also Jim Harbaugh got a second interview for the Chargers. That would be very interesting if you have Jim Harbaugh as well as Sean Payton in that same division over there in the AFC West. That would be very interesting because both of them are very moody and a little bit immature at times, and I just think it would be really funny for them two to be to just have an attitude against each other all season long, and just that would be entertaining in itself. That would be content in itself for the AFC West. But yeah, I think a lot of these teams are a pretty solid destination for some of these head coaches, but we'll see what happens at the end of the day. Let's move on to the conference championship preview and gambling prediction. We're going to start here with what I'm going to preface this once again with I'm going to reserve the right to change my mind if we get later on in the week and some things change, personnel things change, injury designations change as well. So I'm going to start here with the Ravens -3.5 versus the Chiefs. It's going to be hard for me to bet personally against Patrick Mahomes as an underdog. But from what I could tell and what I can see from this Ravens team, this team they're just a team on a mission. The vibes are immaculate. It is very reminiscent to me of the 2017 Philadelphia Eagles vibes going through that Super Bowl run there. Even last year's Philadelphia Eagles Super Bowl team, there was just a certain feel and a certain vibe to a team that is destined to go at least to the Super Bowl and potentially to win it. And the Ravens have that right now. Lamar Jackson's playing great football. They're so balanced. They can run at you. They can pass the ball on you. Their defense is fast, physical, just everything, man. They have good play callers on both sides of the ball, Todd Monken and Mike McDonald. They're both doing a great job there. So I really, really, really like this Ravens team. I think they're going to go all the way. I think they're going to win the whole thing. So spoiler alert for next week's podcast, essentially, whenever that rolls around. I think the Ravens get the job done here, and I think they do cover the 3.5 right now. So that's where I'm going for the time being. If there's some injuries that pop up or something like that I don't like on one side or the other, I may change it, like I said. Let's move on to the next one. We got Lions +7 versus the 49ers. This one, I feel like a lot of people are jumping on the Lions to cover this spread right now. But personally, for me, this whole decision hinges on what happens with Deebo Samuel. If Deebo Samuel is out of this game, I really like the Lions to cover here at 7. If he's in, I'm a little bit more hesitant on it, but I still think I'll probably stick with the Lions to cover here. Just basically, this more has to do with the way Brock Purdy looked in that game. I think the clock's gonna strike 12 on Brock Purdy at some point here, and I just don't know if he is going to have a great game against this Lions team. The Lions just put so much pressure on you to score points because they can score points pretty much at will for the most point at this point. They've run the ball so well. Jared Goff's been very efficient in the playoffs here. He's made a few mistakes here and there, but for the most part, he's been nails all postseason long so far. He's getting the ball to his playmakers, and they're making plays for him right now. Sam Laporta is hard to cover. Amon-Ra St. Brown's hard to cover. Jahmyr Gibbs out, in the middle of the field, creating havoc for people in the passing game. They have weapons on weapons. David Montgomery can be the hammer if you need him to be. They just have players, man. And then the defensive line right now is playing so well for the Lions that I feel like they can give the 49ers a real game. I personally think the 49ers still probably pull this game off. Unfortunately, I'm rooting so hard against the 49ers. As an Eagles fan, I just have to at this point. They've talked way too much junk, and they have this straw man idea of like everybody's doubting them, but realistically, they're one of the better rosters in all of football, and nobody's saying anything about them, being not the favorite going forward. So I'm just rooting for the Lions to potentially get this win, but I think personally the 49ers will win this game. I just think the Lions can keep it really competitive in this one. Like I said, reserving the right to potentially change my mind on these moving forward going into the week. So this pretty much wraps it up for the podcast. Stay tuned for my gambling predictions, my actual ones I'm going to put on YouTube Shorts and TikTok. Look out for those. They will be up by at least Saturday of this weekend. So look out for that, and rate, review, subscribe. Give us some thumbs up, share this to your friends, and I appreciate everybody listening once again. We'll be back next week, and I will talk to you later. Peace.